My name is Jessica Marie Thompson. I'm 28 years old. And on the evening of August 19th, I died alone in my studio apartment after my heart suddenly stopped while I was lying in bed. I was a graphic designer living in Denver, Colorado, single, career-focused, trying to make it in the creative world. I had a nice little apartment, a good job at a marketing firm, and what looked like a pretty normal life from the outside. I went to church when I felt like it, usually around Christmas and Easter. I prayed when things got tough, but mostly I handled life on my own. I thought I was doing okay. I remember feeling this weird pressure in my chest that night, like someone was sitting on me. I tried to sit up, but my left arm went numb. That was the moment when everything I thought I knew about life collapsed. My body failed me, and yet I felt strangely aware of something greater. Death, which I had always imagined as a final end, revealed itself as a passage. My mind raced, not about the apartment, not about my unfinished projects at work, but about my soul. I suddenly realized how shallow my faith had been. I had treated God like an accessory, someone to call on only when I was desperate. And now, lying on that bed, unable to move, I wondered, what would he see in me? As my breathing stopped, I felt a separation not only from my body, but from everything I had relied on. The security of my career, the identity I built through work, the independence I was proud of, all of it felt meaningless. In that silence, I confronted the truth. I had lived believing I was in control, but my faith was thin, fragile, more tradition than conviction. Dying alone revealed that I had been spiritually alone for years. As my soul drifted away from my body, I became aware of a presence that words could never fully capture. It was not terror that greeted me, but a love so intense that it dissolved my fear. Out of that radiant light came Jesus. He did not need to introduce himself. I knew instantly who he was. His gaze pierced straight through me, yet it did not condemn, it embraced. In his presence, I realized that all my questions about eternity were secondary compared to one truth. He was real, and he was here with me. For years, I had spoken of him casually, prayed to him when it was convenient, and doubted his nearness when life seemed quiet. Yet now, there was no distance, no silence, only certainty. His very being was the answer to doubts I had carried since childhood. Jessica, he said gently, calling me by name. That single word felt like the foundation of my existence. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be fully known. My achievements, my failures, my secret habits, all lay bare before him. Yet instead of shame crushing me, I felt a strange invitation to trust. Faith, I began to see, was not about rules or rituals, but about surrender. It was not about proving myself worthy, but about admitting I never could be without him. When he extended his hand, I felt an inner release, as if years of striving to manage life on my own were finally exposed as futile. He led me into what I sensed was a holy place, though it did not matter what it looked like. What mattered was that he was walking with me, guiding me away from self-reliance into trust. I realized faith was not simply believing in his existence. It was choosing to let his love define me. Jesus did not allow me to linger only in comfort. His eyes, though filled with love, carried a seriousness that I could not ignore. Jessica, he said, you have lived thinking that faith is optional, something you can place on a shelf until you need it. But faith is not an accessory. It is the center of life. And without surrender, the heart becomes a place where darkness hides. As he spoke, I became aware of my own life laid bare before me. Not in the form of images or physical rooms, but in the undeniable truth that my soul was not clean. I had convinced myself I was a good person because I did not harm others, because I worked hard, because I prayed occasionally. Yet, in his presence, I saw how many times I had chosen comfort over obedience, secrecy over honesty, pleasure over purity. The weight of that realization pierced me deeper than any fear of death. For the first time, I understood sin not as a list of broken rules, but as separation from him. And in that separation, the shadows had grown. My normal life, so polished on the outside, was in reality entangled with chains I had never admitted. Yet even as shame rose within me, his love remained steady. He was not exposing me to humiliate me, but to heal me. His voice carried both conviction and hope. What you hide will hold you captive, but what you surrender, I will redeem. In that moment, I realized that true faith begins where excuses end. It was not about denying the darkness, but about allowing his light to enter it. And now, if you are listening to my story, I want to invite you to reflect. What shadows are still hidden in your own heart? Comment below with a simple prayer. Lord, cover me and protect me, so that together we may step into his light and experience his shelter. The Lord's voice grew even more direct. Jessica, he said, there is something you have carried in secret for years. You thought it was only a private habit, but it became a chain binding your soul. For 6 years you turned to pornography and self-pleasure, believing it would relieve your loneliness, yet it only deepened the emptiness. The truth struck me like a mirror I could no longer turn away from. I had convinced myself that what I did in private harmed no one. I told myself it was stress relief, a way to cope with pressure, a harmless indulgence. But in his presence, I saw clearly that every choice had a spiritual consequence. What I called escape was actually surrender, to desire, to secrecy, to lies whispered in the dark. Jesus continued, every time you chose lust instead of love, you opened the door for the enemy. The darkness did not come all at once, but little by little, until it became a stronghold. You believed you were in control, but control was the very thing you lost. His words revealed the hidden war I had ignored. This was not just about behavior, it was about allegiance, who I trusted, who I allowed to shape my heart. Shame rose like a storm inside me, but his compassion steadied me. He was not exposing my sin to crush me, but to set me free. And in that moment I realized, true faith requires honesty before God. If I could not bring even the secret into his light, then my faith was only partial. He was inviting me to stop fighting alone, to surrender the struggle I had hidden from everyone. As Jesus revealed the hidden chains, I began to see the deeper cost of my choices. This was not only about secret acts, it was about the distortion of my entire heart. What I thought was harmless relief had rewired my mind, shaping how I viewed love, intimacy, and even my own worth. I realized how addiction had stolen from me in ways I never admitted. It taught me to see people as objects instead of souls, to measure affection by excitement instead of sacrifice, to confuse desire with love. No wonder real relationships had felt impossible. I had been comparing reality to illusions, and reality could never win against fantasy. What I believed was freedom had been slavery, twisting both my spirit and my emotions. Jesus spoke gently. Jessica, this is why faith cannot remain divided. When the soul is given to lies, the heart forgets how to love. Lust consumes what love was meant to build. And when you let sin define intimacy, you cannot experience the beauty I created for you. His words pierced me, but they also explained why my life had felt so empty even when everything looked fine on the outside. I saw clearly that spiritual bondage always has emotional consequences. My inability to trust others, my pattern of isolation, my broken attempts at relationships, they were not random accidents. They were the fruit of a heart disconnected from truth. What seemed private was never private. What seemed personal was actually spiritual. At that moment, I understood that faith was not only about eternity, but also about how we live and love here and now. A faith without surrender leaves the soul vulnerable, and a vulnerable soul shapes a wounded life. Jesus was not just exposing my pain. He was offering to heal it, to restore in me the capacity to love with purity. Jesus did not leave me in the heaviness of my realization. With tender authority, he spoke, Jessica, sin has wounded you, but it does not have to define you. My love is greater than your chains, and my forgiveness is stronger than your shame. But you must choose. Will you surrender everything to me? His words felt like both a challenge and a rescue. For years I had tried to fix myself with half measures, deleting, promising, hiding. I thought sincerity was enough, but sincerity without surrender had kept me bound. Now, standing before him, I understood. Freedom could not be earned, only received. He invited me closer, and though I could not see with physical eyes, I knew he was leading me into the river of life. It was not just water, it was truth, cleansing, and renewal. "Step in," he said. "Let me wash you, not just on the outside, but deep within where no one else can reach." My heart trembled. What if I failed again? What if I was too damaged? Yet his presence silenced those doubts. I realized repentance was not about proving my strength, but admitting my weakness. It was about giving him access to the places I had kept locked. When I surrendered, it felt as though years of guilt melted away. I sensed his forgiveness not as an idea, but as a reality flowing through me. Shame that had been a constant shadow was lifted. A new clarity filled my heart. I was not defined by my past, but by his love. After cleansing me with his forgiveness, Jesus spoke again with a gentleness that carried great authority. "Jessica," he said, "your struggle was not only about lust, it was about misunderstanding love. The enemy twisted what I created as holy, and you accepted the counterfeit. Let me show you the truth." His words opened my understanding in a way I had never seen before. I realized that what God designed as sacred had been reduced in my mind to something casual, selfish, and empty. For years, pornography had painted intimacy as performance, as consumption, as an escape. It taught me to seek satisfaction without sacrifice, pleasure without covenant, closeness without commitment. But that was never God's design. Jesus explained, "True intimacy is not just physical. It is the joining of two souls, bound by covenant and blessed by my spirit. In marriage, sexuality is not shameful, it is holy. It reflects my love for my people, faithful, selfless, life-giving. When the act is separated from covenant, it loses its meaning and becomes a doorway for despair." In that moment, I saw the stark contrast. What once seemed thrilling now looked shallow. What once felt like control was revealed as emptiness. Yet what he described, love rooted in purity, was deeper, richer, radiant with hope. I understood that faith was not only about avoiding sin, but about embracing God's design. To honor him in every part of life, including sexuality, was to live in freedom. For the first time, I believed that love could be whole, sacred, and healing, not distorted by shame. As Jesus finished showing me the truth about love and purity, he turned to me with a seriousness that felt eternal. In his hands appeared a small scroll, glowing with a light that seemed alive. He placed it in my hands and said, "Jessica, this is my message. It is not only for you, but for many who walk the same hidden path." I unrolled the scroll, and the words seemed to burn into my heart. "Tell my daughters that I see their secret struggles. Tell them that what they do in private matters to me. Tell them that pornography and masturbation are not harmless habits, but spiritual doors through which the enemy enters. Tell them I love them too much to leave them in bondage. Tell them freedom is possible, but it requires complete surrender, not just good intentions." As I read, I felt both the weight and the privilege of his calling. For years, I had lived ashamed of my own weakness, thinking it disqualified me. But now I saw that my brokenness was the very place where his strength could shine. The scroll was not only words, it was a mission, a charge to lift my voice so that others could hear the truth I had once ignored. Jesus spoke again, "Jessica, do not share this with condemnation, but with compassion. The world has lied, and many are trapped. You will be my witness that freedom is real, not because you are strong, but because I am strong within you." Tears filled my eyes. I understood that this was no longer only my story. It was a testimony entrusted to me for the sake of others. My faith, once shallow and divided, was now being shaped into a calling. The light around me began to fade, and I felt a pull stronger than gravity itself. I did not want to leave. The presence of Jesus was the safest place I had ever known. Yet his words echoed, "Your work on earth is not finished. You must go back." I resisted in my heart. How could I return to the same world where I had failed so many times? But he touched my face and said, "Jessica, you will not return alone. My spirit will go with you. And now you carry a message that will give hope to many." With that, I felt myself falling, not into darkness, but into my own body. When I opened my eyes, there was confusion, shouting, hands pressing against me. I could hear the voices of paramedics trying to revive me. What they called impossible had happened. I was alive again. But inside, I knew the greater miracle was not my heart beating, but my heart transformed. The days that followed were filled with wonder. Doctors could not explain how I survived 22 minutes without brain damage. Friends could not understand why I looked at life so differently. But I knew the truth. I had been given back not just life, but purpose. Carrying the scroll in my heart, I understood that faith was no longer about my private survival. It was about becoming a witness, about declaring that chains can be broken, that shame can be lifted, that freedom is real. I was no longer a woman hiding behind appearances. I was a messenger entrusted with a divine assignment. In the months that followed, my life took on a new direction. I no longer hid behind shame or silence. I began sharing my story first with my sister, then with a small women's group at church, and eventually online. To my surprise, countless women reached out. They confessed that they carried the same hidden struggles, the same chains, the same fear of being the only one. Each message reminded me that the scroll Jesus placed in my hands was not symbolic. It was a mission unfolding in real time. I saw how many hearts were desperate for hope, for truth spoken without judgment. And as I shared, I realized my weakness had become my testimony, and my past was now a weapon against the lies of the enemy. 18 months later, I was no longer the same Jessica. Not because temptation disappeared, but because my faith was anchored in someone greater than myself. I had found freedom, not through my strength, but through surrender. And in that freedom, I discovered joy, peace, and the ability to love without fear. Now, I speak to you who are listening. Jesus sees you. He knows the struggles you carry in secret, and he is not angry with you. He is heartbroken to see you settle for less than his best. Freedom is not a fantasy. It is possible when you surrender everything into his hands. Final message to the audience. If you feel touched by this story, I invite you to take one simple step of faith. Write the words, "Lord, cover me and set me free" in the comments. Let it be your prayer, your declaration, your first act of surrender. May your honesty be the doorway for his healing, and may you experience the same freedom I have found in him.